The mountain stands, eternal and silent, rising 8,849 meters above the sea. Mount Everest, Chomolungma, the goddess mother of the world. For centuries it has watched over the Himalayas, a sentinel of ice and stone, indifferent to the passage of time, indifferent to the dreams of those who dare to climb its slopes. Tonight, we journey back to May of 1996 to tell a story of ambition, of nature's power, and of the thin line between dreams and survival. This is a story told slowly, carefully, as the mountain itself moves through time and snow and wind. It is a story of human courage and human frailty, of decisions made in the thin air where judgment becomes clouded, and the mountain reveals its true nature. Close your eyes and let us climb together into the past. Let us walk in the footsteps of those who sought to touch the roof of the world and discovered that some places demand more than we can give. Spring arrives late in the Himalayas. The brutal winter winds that tear across the summit, reaching speeds of over 200 miles per hour, begin to ease their grip. The temperatures, which can plunge to 70 degrees below zero, start their slow climb towards something almost bearable. And every year, as the season shifts, climbers from around the world gather at base camp, a temporary city of colorful tents sprawled across the Khumbu Glacier, 17,000 feet above sea level, where the air grows thin and breathing becomes conscious work. Here, at base camp, the preparation begins, the acclimatization, the waiting. Climbers spend weeks here, allowing their bodies to slowly adjust to the altitude, making rotations up to higher camps and back down, coaxing their blood to produce more red cells, training their lungs to extract oxygen from air that contains less and less of it with every 1,000 feet of elevation gained. In May of 1996, several expeditions made camp on the mountain slopes. Among them, 2 commercial groups stood out. One was led by Rob Hall, a 35-year-old New Zealander, experienced and deeply respected in the mountaineering community. Hall had summited Everest 4 times before. He was methodical, safety-conscious, a guide who set firm turnaround times and insisted his clients respect them. His company, Adventure Consultants, had built a reputation for getting clients to the summit and, more importantly, getting them down safely. The other expedition was led by Scott Fisher, a 40-year-old American, strong and confident, known for his powerful climbing ability and his infectious enthusiasm. Fisher's company, Mountain Madness, was newer to Everest, but Fisher himself was no novice. He had climbed the world's highest peaks, and he brought to Everest a style that was perhaps more relaxed, more trusting of his client's own judgment. These were guides who, for a fee of $65,000, would lead paying clients to the summit, to the top of the world, a dream that many held, but few could reach alone. The rise of commercial expeditions had democratized Everest in a way, making it accessible to those with money and determinations, if not always with the technical skills that had once been required. It was a controversial development, one that traditional mountaineers viewed with skepticism, even disdain. The mountain waited, as it always does, patient, ancient, indifferent to the debates about who should or should not be allowed to climb its slopes. Base camp bustled with preparation during those April weeks. Tents dotted the Khumbu Glacier in a sprawling maze. climbers acclimatized, slowly, methodically, allowing their bodies to adjust to the altitude. Sherpa teams worked tirelessly, fixing ropes through the treacherous Khumbu icefall, that nightmare maze of house-sized ice blocks that shift and groan and sometimes collapse without warning. Days passed, then weeks. The weather was watched constantly, carefully. Meteorologists were consulted, satellite images studied. Everyone was waiting for the window. There is a window, a brief window, in mid-May usually, when the jet stream lifts and the summit becomes almost reachable. The jet stream, that river of air that normally tears across Everest summit with winds that would knock a person off their feet in seconds, sometimes shifts north for a few days. Those are the days when climbers make their attempts. Those are the days when the impossible becomes merely incredibly difficult. Almost. The teams included experienced mountaineers and novices alike. On Rob Hall's expedition was Doug Hansen, a postal worker from Seattle, who had attempted Everest with Hall the previous year, turning back just a few hundred feet from the summit. This year, Hansen was determined to finish what he had started. There was Beck Weathers, a pathologist from Texas, an amateur climber driven by a need to test himself against the ultimate challenge. There was John Krakauer, a journalist on assignment for Outside magazine, an experienced climber who would later write the definitive account of the disaster in his book, Into Thin Air. On Scott Fisher's team was Sandy Pittman, a New York socialite attempting to become the first American woman to climb the 7 summits, the highest peak on each continent. There was Lene Gammelgaard, a Danish climber, and Charlotte Fox, a mother of 2 from Aspen. Each had their own reason for being there, each carrying their own story up the mountain, their own hopes, their own fears. The mountain did not care about their stories. The mountain never does. On May 9th, the first summit attempts began. Some teams turned back, but wisely reading the signs that conditions were not quite right. Others pushed through, reaching the summit in the days before Hall's and Fisher's teams would make their attempt. The mountain revealed nothing of what was coming. The weather held. The winds stayed manageable. There was no warning. By May 10th, Rob Hall's team and Scott Fisher's team prepared for their summit push. They would climb through the night, through the darkness, reaching for the top in the early morning light. This is the standard approach on Everest. You leave Camp 4, the highest camp, around midnight. You climb through the coldest hours when the snow is most stable, when avalanche danger is lowest. You aim to summit around dawn, giving yourself the entire day to descend before darkness falls again. The route is methodical, well established by decades of expeditions. From Camp 4, perched at 26,000 feet on the South Col, climbers enter what is called the death zone. The air here contains only 1/3 the oxygen of sea level. At this altitude, the human body begins to die. Slowly, cell by cell. You cannot acclimatize to the death zone. You can only endure it for a limited time before it kills you. Every hour spent above 8,000 meters is an hour borrowed against a debt that will eventually come due. They climbed in the darkness, headlamps bobbing like small stars against the vast black mountain. Step, breathe, 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 step. This is the rhythm, the only rhythm that matters. At this altitude, every step requires 3 or 4 breaths. Your heart pounds, your vision narrows, your thoughts slow and become simple, reduced to the basic calculus of survival. Put one foot in front of the other, keep moving, don't stop. The south summit came first, reached in the pre-dawn hours. A false peak, still hundreds of feet below the true top, but close, so close now. From here, the route traverses a narrow ridge, a corniced knife edge with dizzying drops on both sides, leading to the Hillary Step. The Hillary Step, named for Sir Edmund Hillary, who first climbed it with Tenzing Norgay in 1953, is a 40-foot rock face, near vertical, requiring ropes and focus in hands that still worked in the cold. On a busy day on Everest, the Hillary Step becomes a bottleneck. Only one person can climb it at a time. If there are many teams attempting the summit on the same day, climbers can be forced to wait, standing still in the death zone, burning through their limited oxygen supplies, as person after person slowly hauls themselves up the fixed ropes. And beyond the Hillary Step, the summit ridge, narrow, exposed, with Tibet falling away on one side and Nepal on the other, thousands of feet of emptiness on either side. The ridge undulates, rises and falls, and then finally, ahead, the summit itself, a space hardly bigger than a large dining table. Prayer flags left by previous expeditions flutter in the wind. The view extends in every direction to the curved horizon of the earth. But on May 10th, something was wrong. The climbers were moving slowly, too slowly. The bottlenecks at the Hillary Step were worse than expected. Some of the fixed ropes that should have been in place were not. Precious time slipped away as guides worked to fix additional lines. The turnaround time, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the time that Rob Hall himself had set as the absolute deadline for turning around regardless of how close you were to the summit, came and went. Some guides made difficult decisions. Some turned their clients around despite protests, despite tears, despite the knowledge that this might be their only chance. Some clients pushed on despite the hour, despite their guides' misgivings. And some guides, perhaps caught up in the moment, perhaps reluctant to disappoint clients who had paid so much and come so far, allowed the turnaround time to pass without enforcing it. The mountain watched and waited. The mountain is always patient. By early afternoon, many climbers had reached the summit. Photos were taken with frozen fingers, flags planted, tears of joy frozen on wind-burned faces before they could fall. The top of the world, the fulfillment of dreams years in the making. For a few precious minutes, they stood on the highest point on earth, feeling the triumph, the exhaustion, the overwhelming relief of having made it. But the weather was changing. Clouds rolled in, thick and fast, moving with a speed that was alarming. The wind began to rise, subtly at first, then with increasing force. What started as a successful day, what had been a string of summits and celebrations, was about to become something else entirely. The mountain was about to remind everyone of a truth that experienced climbers know well. Getting to the summit is optional. Getting down is mandatory. The descent is always the dangerous part. Your body is exhausted. Your supplemental oxygen is running low or already gone. Your mind is foggy from lack of oxygen, from exhaustion. from the intense focus required for hour after hour of climbing. Judgment becomes impaired. Simple tasks become difficult. And now, the storm. Visibility dropped to mere feet, then to nothing at all. Climbers became separated from their groups, losing sight of the person ahead of them, the person behind. The fixed ropes, covered in accumulating snow, became hard to find, forcing climbers to search with their hands, pulling off gloves in the desperate cold to feel for the rope. What had been a clear route, marked by boot prints and the tracks of dozens of previous climbers, became a white void, a featureless landscape where direction became meaningless. The wind howled, reaching speeds of 70, then 80 miles per hour. The temperature plummeted, minus 40 degrees, minus 50, with wind chill far below that. At these temperatures, exposed skin freezes in less than a minute. Frostbite is not a possibility, but a certainty. In these conditions, the mountain becomes unknowable. Directions disappear. Up, down, left, right, all become the same swirling white. Landmarks vanish. The world shrinks to a circle of white, just a few feet across. You can be 100 yards from camp and never find it, walking in circles until exhaustion and hypothermia take you. Rob Hall was high on the mountain with his client Doug Hansen. Hansen had tried once before the previous year and turned back, agonizingly close to the summit. This time he was determined. They had reached the summit together, but late, very late. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, perhaps even later. Now, descending, Hansen was struggling, moving slowly, stopping, unable to go on. His oxygen had run out. His body was shutting down. Hall stayed with him. A guide stays with his client. This is the code. This is the promise that guides make, the responsibility they accept when they take money to lead people up the mountain. Hall could have descended. He could have saved himself. But he stayed. But the storm had other plans. The storm had no interest in codes or promises or loyalty. Scott Fisher, strong Scott Fisher, who could outclimb almost anyone, was also in trouble. Exhausted, perhaps suffering from high-altitude cerebral edema or pulmonary edema, he was descending far too slowly, falling behind his group. His guide, Anatoly Bukrev, a legendary Russian climber, had descended earlier, a decision that would later be controversial. But Bukrev would prove himself a hero, climbing back up into the storm multiple times, searching for missing climbers, saving lives at great risk to his own. Others were scattered across the mountain. Some found their way to Camp 4, stumbling in exhausted and frostbitten, but alive. Others did not. They huddled together in the storm, waiting, hoping for it to pass, for visibility to improve, for a break in the wind that would allow them to find their way. Night fell, and with it came the true test. The storm raged on. No visibility, no shelter, just endurance, just survival. The temperature dropped further. The wind showed no sign of easing, and scattered across the mountain, climbers fought to stay alive through the longest night of their lives. Several climbers found themselves trapped just a few hundred yards from camp. So close they should have been able to see it, but in the whiteout it might as well have been on another planet. They formed a huddle, pressing together, sharing what little warmth their bodies could still generate. As the hours crawled by with agonizing slowness, Beck Weathers was among them, suffering from the cold, from exhaustion, nearly blind from a pre-existing eye condition exacerbated by the altitude. As dawn broke and the storm eased slightly, Weathers was found by another climber, but he appeared to be dying, unconscious, his face and hands grotesquely swollen and frozen. The grim calculus of high-altitude rescue was applied, resources were limited, and Weathers appeared beyond saving. He was left for dead. But Beck Weathers refused to die. Hours later, in an act of will that defies explanation, he regained consciousness. And he walked, stumbling, blind, frost-bitten, he walked back into camp, a ghost returning from the dead. He would lose his right hand, his nose, parts of his face, but he would survive. Rob Hall remained near the summit with Doug Hansen through that endless night. Radio calls came through, crackling, distant. Hall's wife, Jan Arnold, herself an experienced climber, pregnant with their first child at base camp, spoke to him by radio. He told her he was cold, very cold, but his words were calm, accepting. There was no panic, no despair, just a quiet acknowledgment of what was happening. This is the mountain teaching its final lesson. This is what the mountain does to those who stay too long. Through the night, rescue efforts continued from Camp 4. Climbers stumbled in one by one, frost-bitten, snow-blind, hypothermic, but alive. Anatoly Bukrev climbed back into the storm multiple times, bringing people down, guiding them to safety. A hero in the truest sense of the word, performing rescues that others thought impossible. But not everyone could be saved. Not everyone would come down. The storm began to ease as dawn approached on May 11th. The wind, still fierce, but the visibility slightly better. Teams organized what rescue efforts they could. They searched. They found some. They lost others. The mountain gave back what it chose to give back, and kept what it wanted to keep. When the final count was made, 8 climbers had died. Rob Hall, who died alone near the summit, speaking to his wife one final time before his radio went silent. Scott Fisher, found by a Sherpa team, already gone. Doug Hansen, who was never found. Andy Harris, Hall's guide, lost somewhere on the mountain. Yasuko Namba, a Japanese climber who had been left for dead with Beck Weathers. 3 Indian climbers from another expedition, Tsewang Smanla, Tsewang Paljor, and Dorje Morup, who disappeared on the north side of the mountain during the same storm. 8 lives taken by the mountain in a single storm. The disaster sent shock waves through the mountaineering world. Questions were asked. Debates raged about commercial expeditions, about whether people who lacked technical skills should be allowed on Everest, about judgment, about the decision to continue past the turnaround time, about the lure of the summit and the cost of reaching it, about whether the mountain had become too commercialized, too crowded, too dangerous. But the mountain remained unchanged, silent, waiting for the next season, the next climbers, the next storm. In the years since, Safety measures have improved. Communication is better. Weather forecasting is more accurate. Rescue capabilities have advanced. But the mountain is still the mountain. The death zone is still the death zone. And climbers still climb because something calls them. Something in the thin air, in the view from the top, in the challenge itself. The need to test themselves against the ultimate test. The desire to stand where so few have stood, to touch the roof of the world, even knowing the price that might be demanded. The families mourned. Rob Hall's daughter was born months after her father died, never knowing him except through stories. The survivors carried on, some never climbing again, others returning to the mountains, unable to stay away. Stories were written, books published. John Krakauer's Into Thin Air became a bestseller. The disaster became a lesson, a warning, a memory seared into the consciousness of the climbing community. But for those who were there on that day in May 1996, it remained simply the storm. The day the mountain reminded everyone of its power. The day that dreams met reality in the death zone, and reality proved stronger. Mount Everest stands as it always has, 8,849 meters, the goddess mother of the world, Chomolungma. The snow continues to fall. The wind continues to blow. The prayer flags flutter and fade and are replaced by new ones, and climbers continue to come, drawn by something they often cannot explain, seeking something at the top of the world. Tonight, we remember those who climbed, who struggled, who survived, and who did not return. Their story is the mountain story, and the mountain story is eternal. It is a story that has been told for as long as humans have looked up at high peaks and wondered what it would be like to stand on top. It is a story that will continue to be told for as long as the mountains stand. Let the wind blow over the summit. Let the snow fall gently. Let the mountain stand in its ancient silence, keeper of memories, witness to human courage and human frailty. And let us rest now, here at the end of this journey into the past. Let the story settle over us like snow, peaceful and still. Sleep well.